This is the second studio by the Architecture and Design Office fame. My name is David Lee, and with me is Marina Borderonay. This week, our guest is Tami Pardee.
Tami is a real estate agent and the founder and CEO of Pardee Properties in California.
Anyone who lives in Los Angeles, especially on the west side, you probably already know of them or you've seen their heart-shaped real estate signs on houses. With Tami, we talk about her upbringing, her background, and what led her to venturing into real estate, and then very quickly leaving her first brokerage to start her own, what it means to list a house, what it means to negotiate, her approach to real estate and working with people, and some of her other business ventures as well.
Yeah, quite a lot.
Indeed. Lots to cover. Sponsors. Stop juggling multiple pieces of software and struggling with design-unfriendly spreadsheets. Programma, built by designers for designers, provides an integrated suite of tools for every phase of your project, from mood boards to advanced specification tools, procurement tracking to project management. Seamlessly integrated, easily shareable, and always current, Programma reduces redundancy and minimizes costly errors. Join Interior Design movers and shakers by starting for free at programma.design/second studio. Experience the difference with Programma, software built for interior design workflows.
We're supported by Enscape. Enscape is a real-time visualization and VR tool that we personally use and recommend. And the reasons why we like it is that it's fast, realistic, and actually easy to use. The interface is great, and they have a good library of components. It also renders in real time, which means that you don't have to waste time waiting for the image to be rendered to see what it's going to look like. It's also a plugin that works with all of the major 3D modeling programs, and it's available for Mac and PC. So if you want to up your visualization and rendering game, I think you should look into Enscape. So make sure you click on the Enscape 3D link in our show notes for a free trial. If you're looking for an ultra-fast and robust BIM computer program for architecture and or interior design, then we suggest you check out ArchiCAD. ArchiCAD leads the industry by enabling architecture and interior design firms around the world to 3D design, supported by innovative technology that expands as far as the imagination can stretch. As ArchiCAD continues to evolve with technological advances, architects can push that technology to their advantage while working in an accurate model. We absolutely love ArchiCAD, and you can try the program for free, fully functioning, if you click the link in our episode notes.
This is the second studio with myself, Marina, and our guest, Tami Pardee. Here we go.
I'm from Oregon.
Oh, no kidding. Okay. In Portland, Central Oregon, Southern Oregon?
No, Portland, like all around Portland. I was raised in, Beaverton, Portland, Lake Oswego. It's just kind of like all around there.
Did you have a sense when you were a kid that you would end up doing real estate? Like, was real estate like a dream when you were a kid, or?
No. I mean, my mom and my dad were both, my mom was a designer, my dad was a builder.
Okay.
So I was raised on construction sites. So I would clean them up. Like, that was my job. And then when I got older, I'd actually, paint and like help, like just be kind of the help on these construction sites. My mom was definitely somebody that made sure that I knew we were working at a very young age. She believed in that. She was a farmer, and my dad was actually a farmer growing up. So they had a very strong work ethic. So we would be the cleanup crew on all the job sites. So I was very familiar with how to build a house, houses in general. Like, that's all we did. So I actually avoided it at first because I was like, I didn't want to be in real estate because my parents were. Mm-hmm. And then because it was kind of forced on me, I guess. And it was more construction, like literally construction work. Mm-hmm. And so when I came to Los Angeles, I got a job but I started working in production and entertainment business. And I got a job with Sharon Stone when she was like right after Basic Instinct.
Wow.
And she asked me to, she knew my background. So she had bought a house and she had fired her contractor. And so I took over doing that work for her and worked with Ralph Lauren doing her basement, which was featured in Architectural Digest, and just project managed it. And and then I started liking it again. I was like, I'm actually really good at this. I actually really enjoyed it. So that was kind of the beginning of the shift back to real estate.
So your parents, your dad, he was a builder, and it was single family houses or other types of...
Well, my dad was, so he got back from Vietnam. He started framing houses. He was a framer. Mm-hmm. And then he started building houses, and then he became, started developing. He had the Holman Company. They built some developments in Oregon. Hmm. And then my dad got into racquetball, actually, back in the day. And he saw that the courts were, they were poured concrete at the time. Mm-hmm. So then he developed the tongue and groove racquetball system, which is it's the standard in the industry still. And then he actually got into, when he was building the athletic club, he realized that locker rooms were the most expensive part of it. And so he started a locker company called Holman Lockers, which has been around since 1979 and is the largest. And actually, it's the largest in the nation still. It does about 80% of Staples and all the big teams and Equinox and Soul Cycle and all of that. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. So this is making sense now. The entrepreneurial spirit, the work ethic, the background in construction is there. And your mom, you said, was a designer also in the architectural space, or?
Yeah, my dad would build the houses and my mom would design them. Okay. And even when they got divorced, they still worked together, and that's what they did. And they had like 5 models. That was when they would do the tracks. Mm-hmm. So it was like the Tiburon and the Aspen. I mean, my dad, every place he went that he liked, he named a house after. So he wasn't very well traveled. It was mostly West Coast locations. Cool. Yeah. And so then my mom would work, and then my mom started building houses on her own, and she had a portfolio on her own, later in life, and did more very high end actually houses in Oregon. And was really talented, really talented.
Then you moved to LA, and that's because you were in the entertainment space for a bit of time.
Yeah, I was in it because it was just a draw, and I production managed live TV shows, and I loved that. As I was doing that, I was making not very good money, and I was flipping houses on the side. So it was when Home Depot was open 24 hours. And I had my friend that was a contractor. And so I'd buy a little house and live it for 2 years. We'd remodel it as I went, and then I'd flip it into the next house. Mm-hmm. And you have the $250,000 tax gain that you don't have to pay taxes on. So I was making more money doing that than I was actually working in production.
Sure.
So after that, I went through and I went actually back and got my MBA at Loyola Marymount. And when I was at Loyola, a friend of mine, because of my production management background, he hired me to actually build affordable housing units. So I built over 500 affordable housing units with him as the really is there. Just I'd go on site and just check the plans, make sure the contractors were doing everything correctly, making sure they were following the plans, which a lot of times they weren't. Sure. They'd forget closets and all sorts of things. But I was like, there's a closet here. They're like, no. I'm like, yeah, it's right there in the plan.
Look at the drawings.
Look at the drawings.
I know. It was, and I was so young, and a female, and I think they weren't used to it. I'd get out there at 5:36 a.m. with them, and they'd be like, it was very funny. It was a very funny part of my life.
So did you go straight from high school to Los Angeles? Was that like the transition at the age?
No, I went to college. I went to Boston University. And then when I came back from Boston to Oregon, honestly, I was supposed to, when my boyfriend at the time wanted to get married, and I knew that wasn't right. And I just got in my car and I drove to LA. And that was wild because I drove to LA. I rented a room from one of my dad's friends. And I mean, I'm a little girl, girl from Oregon, not very, went to Boston, but not very exposed to the world, and come to LA. And she was dating, I mean, this is before OJ and that whole thing. She was dating him. And he'd call, it was just a wild. And then she had an affinity for, I don't know. I didn't know her. It was just a room I was renting, but the things that happened, and I was like, I got to get out of here. This is absolutely nuts.
That is such a way to get into LA. That's like an LA story.
Oh yeah. And then it ridiculous. Was crazy. I was like, what is this? I got to get out of here. So I did. And I started working in production. I got a job at Paramount Pictures actually first. And then I worked in live TV, and then I worked for Sharon Stone.
So how long were you doing production before? Well, let me go back one step. So what did you study at Boston?
I studied business, actually. Okay. So I was just business management. Yeah.
And for how long did you do production, and were you in the entertainment space, as your primary profession, let's say,
about
before?
6 years.
That's a pretty long time. Yeah.
Yeah. I was actually, I did movies. I'm a worker. So I was always worried about the next job when I was doing freelance, and I was never without a job. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was quickly hired, and I actually got promoted. I mean, I started as a PA, and 3 days later, they made me an assistant coordinator. It was boom,
My guess is that the responsibilities and what you had to do when you were in production, there's a lot of project management. Like there's a lot of the same skill sets maybe between that and then the construction project management and maybe what you're doing today.
Yeah, that's actually the basis of my company is when I had my first child and I needed to go back to work because it just financially I did. And I was like, wait, I should just take the production model and put it over the real estate model, the brokerage model, really. So it's because the brokerage model, it had one person repping buyers and sellers. They were always kind of running around, super inefficient. And that's actually when I started. I was like, I can make this more efficient by actually placing the production model, which is, you pitch a show, you pre-production, production, post. It's basically the same as the real estate model. It's like, you go for the listing, you're interviewed, then you prep the house. It's pre-production. It's production when you're on the market, and then it's post. I mean, it's really the same overlay, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And you had said that is compared to and different from the brokerage model. Could you explain what that means?
So when I started about 20 years ago, and that was very, very different. Now everyone kind of has been doing it. So the brokerage model, the brokers like Coldwell Banker, Compass, any of them, the agency, they're really in the business of hiring as many agents as they can and getting a percentage of their book of business. That's how most brokerages work. Okay. So for me, I was like, listen, I want to spend the money actually marketing the homes and in my marketing department, because I don't need 500 agents to manage. What I need is really good people that can do more business, but they have the support to go through everything so they can focus on the client, the negotiations, all of that. I mean, I don't need an agent that does the paperwork from A to B. Now, a lot of one-off agents will do everything. And how good are, you kind of stay in your lane. Yeah. So I'm really good at negotiating. I'm really, really good at it. And I'm good at connecting all the dots, but I'm not a paperwork person. It's not what I'm good at.
It's not your passion in life is, but for some people though, they love it. They love that kind of stuff. So that's interesting. So really it's in one case you have, let's say an individual who's a real estate agent and they're doing everything and wearing 12 different hats versus having a team where people can specialize in what they're naturally good at and want to do and have the team support fill in the gap, so to speak.
100%. Gotcha. And I think that's really important, actually. And I have people that love paperwork and they're so organized and it's incredible. And and they're incredible at what they do because of that. So I think everyone really making sure the people are on the right seats in the bus is really important. So
as Pardee Properties, are you your own brokerage?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. So real estate is something that we are familiar with, but this is not our profession, obviously. And I've spoken with a few real estate agents about this subject of it being their own brokerage, and a lot of them are hesitant to do that because you take on the risk. Whereas if you go with a Compass or I name one of the big ones, right? That they're covering all of the bases, and you kind of just act as a sort of like a freelancer, almost like a independent contractor in a way.
Yeah, they are all ICs, actually, independent contractors. I used to think that too, and then 20 years ago, I was at Remax originally, and then I was like, wait, how much is this E&O insurance? Like, is it really that much? And it's like $40,000 a year. So for me, it made a lot more sense to just pay my own E&O, have my broker's license. And then also the thing I love is that I'm nimble. Like our company is nimble because we can make the decisions and move, and we can identify ourselves in marketing in a different way that other brokerages at Compass, they have to be black and white. They have to be, just all, it's like, how can you express who you are with that?
Yeah. Interesting. I would say we probably lean in the same direction as you, is that we've always preferred with whatever businesses or ventures we're doing to have more control and authority and more freedom rather than safety, which doesn't always pan out, but usually it does. And it's there's some inherent risk if you think about it that way, but it's always allowed us, it's actually to be nimble. It's a good way to put it. It's allowed us to do things that I know we wouldn't have been able to do, or it would have taken us a lot longer, or we would have to get approval from someone, and the list goes on, right? But that flexibility is something that's been a huge asset, I think.
Yeah, I think it actually, and I think it's important for people to remember that. I think it actually brings in creativity and people and freedom for people to like express who they are and to be like, okay, how can we do things differently? Like I remember it was about a year ago, I was like, okay, everyone, we're going to do a heart-shaped sign. And I thought my staff was like, you are nuts. And I'm like, I might be nuts, but we're going to try it because nobody else has done it.
Yeah.
You know? And we get so many calls on just that one sign because they're like, thanks for thinking out of the box, literally the box, right? I'm like, no problem.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about the sign because it is very different. It's not, your typical like corporate looking sign that you see on a house that's for sale. It's more of like a little wink when you walk down the street and, it kind of like you're interested, you're intrigued, you want to know more. Where did the idea come from? Were you just tired of seeing the same sign everywhere every time there is a house for sale?
No, I've been, to be honest with you, I think that I mix my work with my like spiritual, emotional life very much so. And I think love is so important. And so I mean, if you went on my house, you'd see hearts and the word love and just bringing it in and calling it in. And I do feel that there's such an emotional and a connection with homes emotionally. And there's so much love there that's been nurtured, that's been brought in, that's been broken. It's all love. So I was like, we should really that's what homes are. They represent safety to people. They represent love. They represent so much about a person. It's not just a financial, there's not even a financial, it's not just a financial. It's even more emotional than financial in most trends and most people we deal with.
That's an interesting way to put it. It's something that we definitely agree with. And it's funny. I mean, you made this point the other day, Marina, that I think one of the things we see often generally, I think in particular in the United States, maybe compared to some other countries, that a lot of times houses and properties are viewed more as just financial investment, kind of like cards to buy and hold on to. Obviously, if someone's collecting houses and they have that much money, then that's one way they look at it. But even for we see sometimes for homeowners who this is their primary residence, they have 2 kids, like this is going to be their home. It's not just a house; it's their home. They still are like really concerned with those aspects of it. And of course, everyone wants to make a good deal. No one wants to lose money. Or in the design of a house, as we see from our end, sometimes they're really concerned with resale value if they do this change. And of course, if a person plans to live in a house for only 4 years and then sell it, then we have to think about that. But for folks who are planning to live in the house for the foreseeable future, for their kids to grow up in, we're always advocating for, unless you're going to do something totally backwards nutso, you should just make the house what it should be for you. And in 15 years from now, when you sell it, like, don't worry about predicting the real estate market in 15 years from now. And by the way, if you're in Santa Monica, Venice, or Beverly Hills, it's going to go up. Like, you won't have a problem with the value, not going up.
100%. I agree with that. And it's interesting because if they're thinking about selling it in 15 years, what's popular today and selling is probably not going to be the same in 15 years. So they might really be a winner if it's really that different and, forward thinking. They might be ahead of the game.
Yeah, for sure. There definitely are trends. It seems to be that the paint everything white and use black hardware is the recent one that we're in. And maybe we're at the tail end, I hope. I'm kind of exhausted of seeing houses that way. I think
we're at the tail end of that. I see more of the Japan, like I still do little flips of my own just to keep myself sharp on design and everything, and very small, like 1,000 square feet houses, like little jewel boxes.
Cool.
And I went with the Japandi style this time. I was like very light and just, very kind of natural and I did use like a brushed brass, just so you know, not black. Not black and white. No.
Nice.
No, black and white.
I mean, look, I have nothing against black hardware, okay? But it's just that it's as you know this, especially when houses are getting prepped to be sold, this is kind of what happens. You just whitewash everything.
Well, and it's kind of an interesting question, right? Like, do you need to, like paint everything white to make the house for sale more appealing, or can you embrace what it is for what it is and hope that you're going to find someone who's going to fall in love with it that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So It kind of depends on the style it is and the locate, like where it is, right? Because you want to appeal to the buyers in the area. So like Venice, I kind of present differently than I do homes in Mar Vista or Santa Monica, right? And you have to look, is it for a family or is it for a couple, right? So it all depends. The thing I think most people, the reason why a lot of people will just paint it white and be like, okay, and do the same staging, which I actually think is wrong. Actually, I think that you have to look at who's your target market in the area that we're selling in. And then you want to appeal to that buyer really. For families, it usually is, if you have some wild colors, sometimes it is better to do a lot of it white, but I don't always paint the whole thing white. I like a pop of, I usually go to Sherwin-Williams, the color of the year. Mm-hmm. And I go for the last like 2 years and I'll throw a pop of those colors in.
Interesting.
To houses because they've done all the research, right? Sherwin-Williams. And I think that needs a little flavor. It can't just be all white all the time, So.
Well, I have the suspicion too that if you're a buyer and you're viewing a lot of houses and you're doing that amount of research, that over a period of time after 10 plus houses, I had one person I know, they viewed 200 in the span of 2 years, and I was like, you should become a real estate agent after this process because you probably know the game.
Or a designer.
Or a designer. You should do something with this knowledge. It's pretty impressive. But after you see a certain number of houses, maybe not quite 200, they all kind of start to blend together in the memory. And I've always felt like that from a seller's perspective, it would make sense to try and find one or two moments in the house, something that makes it a bit more memorable. So that at least it's memorable, because I know for myself, at least after I see enough places, I start to forget and I'm not able to distinguish one from the other.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I sell, a ton of all different kinds of houses. And I'll tell you, the ones with more of a soulful connection where people can feel it. And it's interesting because it's off of usually not just some staged houses, but mostly people's personal houses. Mm-hmm. It can be the smell. It can be the feel when you walk in. I mean, it can be all of that, but it will sell for more money. I mean, actually landscaping will sell like amazing outdoor areas and moments, like you were saying. If you can create a few of those in the house, that's what people want. They want to know that they can connect in the house and that they can just like breathe. That's what people are looking for. They are looking for their homes to relax, feel safe, connect, love, and just breathe.
I love that description of the feeling that a house can give you. And it's something that we resonate with and we feel, because this is our profession and our study. So when we step into a house, this is the first thing that we're sort of looking for. Is it hard sometimes for new buyers who are new to this and they're stepping to a house for the first or second or third time to get that feeling? And so I'm asking this question sort of from the perspective that when we work with clients, if we are working with a client who has a good eye for design, or if they grew up in a house that was interesting, let's say it's a mid-century Eichler or something, our job becomes a lot easier because they get it. They felt it already, and we don't have to try and sell this experience to them. Versus when we have a client who's not experienced interesting or good architecture or great architecture, it's harder for them to imagine what that can do for them. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. And I think that's actually just, from what I find actually in that is just, I find that on people's like who they are, how much they've grown. Like, have they traveled? What kind of house did they grow up in? Right. I find in our areas that we work in, really Los Angeles, I do feel like people are more attuned to that than I would say in Portland or, in Oregon or, on the outskirts of things.
Sure.
I go to some places, I'm like, how does anyone live in this house? Like the sheets are crunchy. It's like, whoa, But here, it's actually people really like they feel it. I think it's because of the design of our restaurants. Mm-hmm. I think that we're really more design focused than most areas in the nation. And I do feel that they appreciate that. And there's an emotional, the emotional tug on a house when you're buying a house. When there's an emotional tug, it's like the fear of loss drives the price up actually. So you can tell when a house can tug at not just one person's emotions, but more, because actually the prices you'll see it from the bidding on that house.
I see.
So,
I see. The people don't want to lose it.
Yeah, I've set several markets based on a very small square footage on just the emotional pull of the house. And it's funny because that's how the trends go with the black and the white. Because this house I sold on Washington Way, I think it was 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they had, they had plaster walls and black, and it was just very European, actually, beautiful. And I mean, it set the record, and it was on a busy street, and it didn't have a parking, but because of the emotional pull.
Yeah.
So I think the design is extremely, extremely important.
Yeah, that's well. First, that's reassuring to hear for us, of course.
Yeah,
we're biased, but I think it's in general though it's interesting because it's very easy for everybody in any profession. So for architects, designers, developers, builders, real estate agents, and homeowners to just go with the safe route and kind of follow the market. The quote market, which is ever this kind of elusive thing that's out there, but follow the trends, follow the market. And the more and more people we speak with are less interested in that, first of all, and they produce things that are like, well, no, I'm going to do what is good, first of all, but I like it, I'm drawn toward it, and I'm going to assume I know someone out there is also going to feel the same way. And I think that's it's a much more, I mean, that's the way that we prefer to see things happen, and that's also how you produce much more interesting results that do move the needle. Otherwise,
I agree with you. I mean, it's funny because my mom, being a designer, remember Farmhouse Modern when it first came to LA like 10 years ago or 15 years ago? So this is embarrassing, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'll tell you, my mom, my mom actually was like, "This is such a great design. We should build a house like this in Oregon." This was like 15 years ago. She was going to do one. I was like, "Oh, I should tell." And I don't know, you know these people because they became huge. It's Thomas James Capital. I was like, "I'm sick of these boxes. They should do Farmhouse Modern." So Tami and I was I was like his first client here, flipping just a small house. I was like, "You know what? You should do Farmhouse Modern." I laid it all out. I showed him the pictures, and then it was like 5,000 Farmhouse Moderns went around. I'm like, oh God. I mean, you want to do things, but you want to like.
So you're responsible for it, basically.
I don't want to say that because I actually told him, I was like, enough. Because the boxes were one thing. I was like, okay, let's get rid of the boxes. Now like plantations, let's like look at other things. But Tommy's not at the company anymore. So, but it was funny. I was like, oh no, what did I do?
You should go back to them and suggest something else.
Well, they've certainly built it.
I did.
Oh, really?
I did. Oh yeah. I was like, you got to stop with this. This is like, we got to have some depth to these. But anyway.
That's funny. Well, they've definitely built a successful business for sure. But the West Side is also a place that's very dear to us because, well, I grew up in Southern California, but it has such a rich background of eclectic and weird, sometimes not great, but just different architecture. Yeah. And of course, for an architect and a designer, that's the things you look for. Even if you don't agree with it, it's kind of like, well, at least someone was trying something. Yeah. At least they were attempting something, and someone thought this was a good idea. They clearly put more money into it than they would have needed to if they'd gone the safe route. And it's something. And I think the West Side does have certainly that history, and it's fun to see it. And it's also, therefore, I think even more exciting when you see properties and houses that are newer that embrace that. They're unique. They're Vez Beach funky or whatever you call it,
Yeah, I agree. I love when the creatives, and you see it with the artists, mostly like the artists and the creatives, and they'll do something like a little turn, and you're like, oh, that's so cool, So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. I was wondering, since you've been in LA for so long now, and you've seen it change quite a bit. How do Venice is very interesting because it is kind of like an experimental ground for architecture, right? Mm-hmm. But I feel like, and maybe that's more of an observation across the design field in general, that there is a lot of kind of like vanilla, riskless types of design. And I'm wondering if you see more of that happening in Venice now than maybe it used to before. Are people still taking risks in designing crazy stuff and being adventurous? Or are they just trying to play safe now?
Well, I think what happened, to be honest with you, I think that people were, taking risks, and we have some really amazing architects that are from Venice and live in Venice and have, but I think what happened is that the developers without the architects and the design aspect came in. Mm-hmm. Actually, I know this because and just kind of was like, I'll do the same house right here. Yeah. Because the lots are the same size, right? Yeah. And that was really a tragedy because, first of all, I didn't it just was a tragedy, honestly, because those developers were just doing that for them. They weren't doing it for an architecture creative or really thinking about how people live. They were basically copying someone else's work and putting it in, mm-hmm. And that was really actually unfortunate. And they were doing it for the money. And that was actually really unfortunate. Now, I think that those people, I actually know some of them that are not here anymore. So I think that that's actually a good thing for our area, because I actually think that I think there's some people that are really creative, larger builders, the Marmals, but mm-hmm. I think that the one, like the people that do 2 or 3, like I have this, that do smaller projects that really care, that are at the job sites, that are like thinking about things like where is somebody going to put their keys when they walk in? Right. Like all of these things are like the detail of those are really what sells for more. Mm. And actually it brings a unique product to the marketplace. So the more people that can get like into the kind of the nitty gritty and really care, mm-hmm. I think the better off we all are.
Do you ever find
the buyers included?
Yeah. Mm. Do you ever find yourself like, I don't know, like wanting to reach out to the architect or the designer just to learn more about like what was the story behind the design of the house? if in any way that could, help the sale, or maybe discover things about the property that maybe the people who are living in it didn't even know about.
I usually talk to the developer is the person who contacts me, because that's the person. And I love it. Like, I love it when they contact me very early in the process, right? Like before they've picked finishes, before they've actually done the entire layout, like all of that. Mm-hmm. Because then I can say, hey, have you thought about this or this, just different things. I mean, even from like a toilet in the master, like I'll see them sometimes. This is not working with an architect like yourselves, a designer, but working with somebody that, they'll put a toilet in and it looks right out into the living room. Like you're sitting in the toilet, looking at the kitchen. You're like, hi,
Yeah.
So I really like when they do reach out. As far as like talking, I don't usually have the I mean, I do sometimes, actually. That's not true. It'd be great to have the opportunity to talk to the architect as they're going through it. And sometimes that does happen. The developer and the architect and I'll get together, just say, oh, this is what we're thinking. Any ideas? And I think that's better, because I can, the one thing, I'm not an architect or a designer, but I can say, this is how people are living now. Yeah. And this is something that's, like a mudroom, or they let, a lot of people like the eat-in, the banquettes right now. Just little things, little things mm-hmm. that like make their life better, that are easy to implement, that could make it that, that's cool. Let's do that, the buyer. So.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's the same thing for us on our side. So when we have development projects, what I will tell the client is like, we should talk to a trusted real estate agent, one of the people we know or one that and this is up in the Bay Area, because we have a certain skill, expertise, and database, but a really strong real estate agent, they will have a much wider set of information, because you guys see so many houses. I see a lot of houses, but not nearly as many for sure. And I want to know before I start putting pen to paper if there's a program or the buyer or the user, as we would call them, the end user, how they live. Is it multi-generational? Therefore, do we need a primary suite on the ground floor? Like all of these things, which I have guesses about, but I would much rather do my research, especially for programming, like at the very beginning, and then start drawing, as opposed to wasting time drawing something. And then later on, when the plans are almost done, have an agent look at it and say, well, why did you do this? No one's going to buy the house unless you have this particular thing that I didn't know about.
And that's the ideal situation. And actually, I said that I don't work with them, but now that I'm thinking about it, I guess I actually do like architect. I do that. Yeah. On the people that have actually done this work and probably learned it the hard way. And I love it because that's my background. So I can read a set of plans. I can go over, it's like, for me, that's like right in my wheelhouse because of my upbringing. So, that's the smartest thing to do, is to work together I mean, honestly, and it's also smart for me. Like when a developer will come in without or without wanting the architect, I'm like, bring in the architect because we can kind of balance off each other of kind of pushing them to not just do black and white.
Sure. Sure. And then your architect's like, you should paint it white and use black hardware.
Oh my God.
That actually reminds me of something else, which is, you had growing up a background in construction and design, so you understood it. You did project management of it, which is a very serious undertaking, one that I think most people vastly underestimate the amount of time and the amount of information that comes to you when you're project managing something for a house, let's say. So you have that experience and that skill. That must have been and still is a huge asset for you as an agent. One of the things that has surprised me over the years is the number of agents, not all, the number of agents who claim to know anything about construction or architecture, but in fact know shockingly little. And I've seen this many, many times. Again, it's not everyone.
I mean, that goes to a lot of the real estate in general. I think that it's such an easy entry point for people to get into real estate. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it's a lot of money, and it shouldn't have such an easy access to just be an agent and then say that you're a part of these things that you really aren't. I mean, until you've built a house, like literally physically on the ground, cleaned it up, seen how the windows are installed. I mean, window installation in California compared to Oregon is not as great. It rains all the time in Oregon, so you have to do it correctly, right?
Sure.
But all the details and like being on a job site, talking to the contractors, seeing how they all blame each other and yell at each other, but also like, right, knowing the price per square. I learned more project managing, listening to all my contractors bitch and yell at each other. It was the funniest thing. I was like, oh wow, this is, that was like my lead in. I was like, oh, you want to know something that's done wrong? Ask the other contractor about the other contractor's work. He'll show it to you.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. And I think it's a discipline. I think it's a course that should be actually required for real estate to know actually what you're selling, really what you're selling. Like you don't sell a watch and not know how it's, if you're in a high-end jewelry store, you would know where that watch came from, how it worked, how it's put together. You'd know about that.
Right. Right.
But not in real estate, I guess.
Well, you bring up another point of the entry bar, I guess, is so low in a sense. It's easy to become a real estate agent. And you must have seen also, I mean, I've seen it, that I feel like there's a lot of people who think that doing real estate is easier than it is. And they think that, well, I can very quickly make a lot of money and this will be kind of a part-time fun thing I do on the side. And I don't need to commit super hard. And my guess is a lot of people approach it that way. And a lot of those folks, they do it for a couple months and then they stop because they realize it's not as easy. And if that's the case, that's got to be another thing that really distorts the profession or makes it difficult for the folks who are operating at the high level. Yeah.
When I first started in real estate, I remember I didn't want to tell anyone what I did because it was embarrassing because it was like and I was like, but I was so good at it. I was like, I get this. I can help people. And it's amazing. These people come in. I had somebody come in. He's like, I'm just going to start slinging houses. I'm like, oh my God. Houses.
Like it's crystal meth or something.
Like, yeah. Oh, okay. I was slinging them around. I'm like, oh my God. So, and you can tell like the top agents, the good agents, they are valuable. I mean, they are, because they save people a lot of money. They see things. I mean, there's not only one negotiation of the price. There's the negotiation after the request for a repair. And if you don't know anything about a house, good luck with your request for repair with that agent. Like that agent, if they don't know, then they're not going to get you money and they're not going to be able to protect you like as a sell, for the listings.
Yeah.
So it's been, it's funny because I see those agents and a lot of them will be like, I want to pick your brain. I want to do this, which is, I hate that term. I think it's so creepy, the pick your brain term.
It is creepy.
It's creepy. It's like, don't pick my brain.
Don't do that.
Anything else but that. It's like a bird or something. So when they say that, I actually always am like, I'm good. We're good. I don't have time to chat. Sorry. But so I think that you can tell people that are going to rise. The people that are committed, that want to learn, that show up. I have a girl in my office, Meredith, who I actually met at a BCBG shoot when they had me for a Women's Inspirational Awards. And she opened the door. She had nothing to do with real estate at the time. There was this warmth and this magic about her. I'm thinking, you are a connector. And she wanted to learn. She's one of my top agents now. I mean, she's incredible. Like, I would hire her to sell my own house. Mm-hmm. And her husband actually, ironically, is a general contractor. So she does know a lot about building. But you can tell when people are just kind of barely in it and they think that they're all this, and then they realize it's a lot harder than you think. And it actually costs a lot more than people think to actually run a team or a business like we do, like a brokerage. So,
really?
Yeah. I mean, it's the marketing, but we have a whole ops division. Like we have 5 guys in our operations that'll go pick up stuff for you, dump it, make sure that doors are open, make sure things are, it's blown out before we show. I mean, it's if you do it right, it's a true business. It's not just slinging houses on the side.
So on that, maybe give us an overview. So how large is Pardee Properties? How many people do you have? Where do you guys, practice or buy and sell houses mostly?
Sure. We have about 45 people right now. We have about 22 agents and about 23 on staff. So we basically, we go anywhere from Malibu to Manhattan Beach, all the way to Los Feliz. So we're basically all of Los Angeles. Yeah, we used to be, and everyone's always like, you're the queen of Venice, you're right here. And the reason I did that originally is because I have 4 kids. So I wanted to make sure I could see my kids. So I really focused on this area. That was, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then when we expanded, I started, I have agents from all over that work with me now. So we really do sell. I mean, we're selling one in Malibu coming up. We have one on Los Feliz. In Manhattan Beach, we just sold one. So we go all over. Mm-hmm. We do a lot. Our office is on Abbot Kinney, and we have an office in Culver City too.
Yep.
And then the desert as well, actually. So that my brother's in the desert, so he runs our desert division.
Oh, that's awesome.
Amazing.
That's awesome. You had mentioned you have 22 or so agents and then 22 other staff. That number surprises me. I would have thought there would be like 75% agents or 80% agents.
Yeah. Most people, that's how most brokerages work. But I have, like, on my personal team, I have a pretty large team. So there's about 10 people on my team that are staff on my personal team. The rest of is marketing. And we do a lot of marketing. And we have our ops team. And most people don't have an ops team. We have 3 to 5 people. We have a couple part-timers on our ops team, 3 full-time. Mm-hmm. So because we want to make sure, we want to be, our hospitality and what we do for our clients is really important. Like, I went over to a listing the other day, and it wasn't even a listing. She just asked me to come meet her. It was when it was raining really terribly, and her house started, it was like pouring in. And I was like, I didn't even do the meeting. I was like, let me get my ops team here and help you, because she didn't know what to do. And they came over, they brought sandbags, they swept her place out. They were like, boom. And she was like, oh my God, I didn't even know what to do. And those types of things are important when you're working with people, is like, how can we help you? Like, what can we do? And she'll be a client forever because of that. Those are the things that most agents don't see. That's why I have a bigger staff and team, because I want to make sure people feel very taken care of when we work with them.
So an ops team is ops is operations or operational. So that's just, they're kind of, I don't know what. They're just, they take care of all the things that fall between the cracks, sort of. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, well, they do everything. So from signage, if like our signs fall down, they go put them, we have a sign, like they do our signs. They do, like, if there's garbage needs to be gone, if there needs to be a house when we're opening it up, we want it to look perfect. So we'll go blow out the yard before. Mm-hmm. They'll go check on houses. They'll go feed, we have somebody with a squirrel, like, in the backyard, and they're going to be gone. And they're like, can you feed our squirrel? I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
Gotcha.
It's just whatever it is, but it's important for people, because a lot of times people will leave when their house is on the market for a few weeks, and we want to make sure their house is taken care of, and it looks amazing when we're showing it too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes total sense. So you started Pardee Properties about 20 years ago. So so how long were you at RE/MAX before you decided to break off and do your own thing?
Well, I started in the business in 2003, 2004, at the beginning of 2003, 4. And I was at Remax about a year during that time, but I always did my own branding because I didn't like the balloon. So, and then I got in trouble.
To be honest, you know, I know Remax probably doesn't care so much about how things look in the balloon, but I will say their logo on the balloon is something that I despise it when I see it. I'm like, this is so dumb. Like, could you just not use that?
Yeah, it was. So yeah, exactly. So I thought the same way. I felt the same way. So then I got in trouble for using my own branding.
Yeah.
And then I was going to go to Keller Williams because I could do my own branding. And then I was like, why don't I just see what this E&O is? Mm-hmm. And so then I just decided it was best to open my own brokerage. I don't even know why. I just was like, no, I'm just going to do this on my own. I can do it my way. You know, I can put this production model over. I can hire the people that I can do everything my way. And that's what I did.
I guess this would be a question for any people who are interested in becoming real estate agents. So this would be for them. But what are some of the things that has clearly helped you achieve the level of success well, I guess there's a lot of ways to dice that up. I guess one would be as a business owner, but maybe more as just a real estate agent. Like, what are some of the things that are critical, I don't know, qualities you have or skills or things you do to help your clients that you recognize as being essential?
I think a few things. I'm a big dot connector. So like if somebody is, you know, I always ask them their story, what's going on and why they're selling and what's happening. And then it's like, I'm connecting the dots. I think I'm very calm and I take everyone through. I'm very steadfast. I'm like, we have this, you know, everything's handled. I have a lot of communication. We tell our clients we're very transparent on communication with our clients. And I think honestly, just being like knowing, like what we were talking about housing, about when somebody comes in and says, oh, I want to do this or this. I'm like, okay, that's going to cost about $7,000 for redoing this. I mean, having the knowledge, you know, I think is important. And just honestly, your reputation is really important. So you have to do right by your clients. You have to do right by people. And, you know, it's hard because you're going through these situations that are highly emotional and you're walking them through. Mm-hmm. And it's important to be kind and calm and move them through and close their properties out. I mean, I'd say 60% is repeat clients or referrals of our business. So that's a big amount.
Yeah, that's a big amount. Actually, and the other way too, 40% is a pretty hefty number to have new people, which is a testament to the marketing efforts.
And now a little break for our show sponsors.
Dear architects and designers, do you know the current spend on your budget? Can you forecast your next 6 months of performance? Do you know the status of all your projects? Have your team's hours been effectively allocated? If you struggle to answer these questions quickly and easily, then you need to explore Monograph. Monograph is a performance management platform. It helps you and your firm make better day-to-day decisions and anticipate what's next with powerful forecasts. It's designed by architects for architects. With Monograph, you get less obscurity and more visibility, less ambiguity and more clarity, less admin and more design. You have to see it to believe it. Your performance becomes a lot easier to manage because it's no longer hiding from you. Tap the Monograph link in our show notes to see for yourself.
The Second Studio podcast is made possible by support from Autodesk. Autodesk has been part of the design conversation since 1982, providing the tools that help architects around the globe imagine and create beautifully designed, memorable buildings that people love and admire.
Autodesk supports the work of the Second Studio, bringing the architecture community together, sparking curiosity, and leading vibrant interviews with the industry's visionaries and thought leaders. The Second Studio works hard to carry the architecture conversation forward, and Autodesk is proud to support this podcast. Learn more about Autodesk by clicking the link in our show notes.
Do you ever turn down houses for sale? Like if it's not a crush or you don't vibe with the sellers, like would you just refuse to do it?
So I think that I have different agents at my company, excuse me, and I have them all for a reason, so that there's some people that work just jive better with other people. And I think it's important to have a personality fit when you're working together because people are different. So when I see people, I very much look at their actually nonverbal communication. I took courses on it and I had my master's in business and on entrepreneurship. And I did a lot with how people are and how they're communicating. I think it's important to put people together that are going to work well together. There's There's times I won't work with somebody that I will put it with somebody else at my company. And there's a few times that in the creepy situations, I was just like, it's not a fit for anybody at my company.
Sure.
I'm not gonna, you just know, if people yell at me, I will let them know, or I will say, you know what? That's not appropriate. We don't yell. Like, we're not going to be screaming at each other. We're going to walk through this. This is a really hard time, though. You have to acknowledge that they're probably going through something really difficult, because a lot of these people, this is their biggest asset, right? Financial asset.
Yeah.
So you also need to be, walk on that very delicately too.
Yeah.
That's really well said to both of the questions. I like no, we're not going to yell. It's like you're telling a kid, no, this is not how you behave in public. Come on.
Right.
But that does happen. Sometimes you have to tell people, like, this is not appropriate here. I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I like the point you brought up also of connecting the dots, as you put it. It's a very interesting way to describe it. It's a very similar thing for us. In fact, we see a lot of times people who approach us to do a house or a remodel, they want to jump into the process very quickly. They're like, let's start drawing. Let's go. Let's start demoing. Let's start doing stuff.
We're like, whoa.
And we usually have to say, okay, that's great. You're enthusiastic. We are too. But for us, it's a lot of actually asking questions and just listening. And then I've never thought about it as a connecting the dots kind of action. But that is actually, that's a great way to put this, what it is. You're trying to collect all this, what would seem to be like almost random information or a very wide set of information, and try to understand the story and the person that connects it all together. And then only after that do we start actually doing work, because we found it's just a more efficient approach. It's a more personal outcome. It makes everything better. In the past, when we've attempted to move too quickly, we always end up looking back and saying we moved too quickly. We should have taken the time to connect more dots before trying to figure it out. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. I the personal relationship is like, it's like, where are you going? What are you, So then, and it's interesting because when you do that, like, they're in it, like, people are in it, but they're not seeing it from this view up here. Right. So when you can see it from this view, you're like, oh, well, what about this? Like, but what if this is a plan then? And they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. I'm like, because they're in it.
Yeah.
And we're out here connecting dots.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it, for sure. Because it is very in houses. They're very complex, and I think most people in their day to day, they don't think about how complex they are, and why would they? But there's a million, tens of thousands of decisions to be made, and it's very easy for clients, for you and for us, I think, to focus on hyper specific things, which is not a bad thing, but you're right. Sometimes you miss the bigger picture that needs to be kind of told. When you started, were you working mostly with buyers and sellers? And do you have a preference, like, personally?
When I started, I was working with both. The first year I was just like, it was really connections. And what I really love is the personal connections, actually. Now I personally have turned into more of a listing agent, because I do think that the two jobs are different. And I think you can't be both to all people. So I work with some buyers, but I have Emma, my right hand, she's a buyer's agent, and she's really great at it. I'll go in for value and opinions and some negotiations on that. But I usually work on the listing side of how do we make the most value for you, and how do we get this on the market, and how should this look, and all of that. So now I work more on the listing side. Is it easier for an agent to have more control over and stability, maybe just in their life professionally, when you are on the selling side and you're in charge of listing rather than buying? Because I feel like buying could be very, what's the word? Sort of like unpredictable. Like, you're waiting on people to make decisions and things. Yeah, I think for me, I 100% think that way. Yes. And a lot of times we'll list somebody's house and we'll rep them as a buyer as well. So we'll do both, because there's the relationship there if they're staying in Los Angeles. But I do think that listing is the key to real estate. It's not the buying side. It's definitely, I would say, the listing side. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever have clients who are selling their house, and after you kind of look at how to market it and put it all together and make it look pretty and all of that, they're like, you know what? I don't want to sell it now because you just showed me that my house is amazing. Like I just discovered the potential. Does that ever happen?
Yeah, it's happened.
It does?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's okay. You know, and honestly, that's okay. Because it's like, I think the one thing about me, I'm not like a lot of agents, it's like they're making a rent. They're like, oh my God, you know, and I'm like, and I've never, ever thought that. I'm like, I want to do what's best for you because you're my lifelong client. We just made your house beautiful and you want to live here for 2, 10, whatever, 20 years. I'll be around, you know, on the other side and I'll be checking in with you every year. We'll just roll with it.
When you decided to start on your own, I want to hear about like the growth from you as an individual practicing and starting your own brokerage to then now having a team of 45 people or whatever the number was. Like that is a massive change. And most agents, I mean, that's not typical for most agents. It's not typical growth for most people in most industries. So I don't have a lot of questions. What was it like? Or did you know at the outset that you had plans to grow to a certain scale, or did it just happen and you just kept going?
You know, it was actually kind of a fluke. I had my first child, Taylor, and to be honest with you, she was an infant, and I went to I couldn't be at home with her all day. It was really, she had colic. I was like, oh my gosh. And financially, I couldn't either. We couldn't, I needed to go back to work. So when I did that, I went to Remax and I sold 33 million my first year, which even in today's, this was in 2004. Even in today's standards, that would be a huge year for a new agent. That's crazy. I mean, huge year. Yeah. And when I did that and people were really happy and they were referring me, and I was like, every time I went to an open house, I was like I was like, okay, I'm going to bring home 3 clients from this open house. Mm-hmm. And I did, you know, I wrote out what I wanted. I projected, I kept writing myself notes and I connected all the dots with everyone too. I didn't just like, oh, I'll call you and not call. I was very diligent how I approached it. So then I hired my first my first assistant, is still with me, actually. I met her through my best friend. She worked at a scrapbook store and now she runs my company, Samantha. She's incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. And so we worked out on my house. And then I realized that there was 5 of us then. It kept growing. And then there were 6 of us. And I was like, okay, I got to move out of the house. Because then I had 2 kids at the house and 2 babies. And so we moved to Abbot Kinney and worked in a little trailer, actually, right on Abbot Kinney in Venice. Really? And then at that point, I was like, oh, this is moving. I mean, I wouldn't even, this is so terrible, but I was so frugal too, because my mom was always like, be frugal, Tami, be frugal. So I had that in the background. So I was like, I wouldn't even have like it was a trailer kind of, it was like, it was on, now it's beautiful and gorgeous, but at that time, and I didn't even have heat and air in it. I was like, we can just have a space heater. We're fine. Yeah. We can have a fan in the summer. And they were like, oh my God, Tami. And I was like, okay. So then we bought the property on Abbot Kinney where our office is, our main office is now. Yeah. So yeah. I just kind of like walked through it. I was like, okay, I'll do that. Okay, I'll do that. And I also let myself, like, I think you can feel things like when it's a yes. And so I pay attention to the yeses. Mm-hmm. And when I feel like I should be walking forward just in my body, I'm like, okay, that feels good. I'm going to do that. So that's people always say, did you think that you were going to be this big? And I still don't think of myself as that way. Like people are like, you're Tami Pardee. I'm like, well, that is my name. Yeah, but I
that is me. Yeah.
You know, I mean, I feel like I'm Tami Pardee, or it's like I'm just myself still. So
that's funny. That's wonderful. We do find that a lot of the people who have achieved objectively a high level of success do feel that way about themselves. And I think it's a good sign, though. I think it's a good sign. I think it's for sure it's healthier than thinking you're like, God's gift to the world.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Even when I show up sometimes at my list, like a listing, people are like, I can't believe you came. I'm like, why wouldn't I come? I'm kind of silly. Yeah. Like, well, should I not be here? Or are you okay that I'm here? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. It's like, oh,
you have to go incognito.
I know. And I'm like, yeah, it's just funny. It's really funny.
It's also interesting. I think I guess I don't know if you call it an illusion, but the ideas that people have about someone they've never met, and then when they meet them, it's an odd thing. I mean, we're in no way comparing where we are to you, but because of the show and other things, we're kind of out there in the architecture and design space. So sometimes, like the other day, I was speaking on the phone with this cold call client. I'm talking to him for like 5 minutes. Then there's like a really long pause, and he says, "Wait, are you the guy on the website?" I'm like, "What do you mean? Am I the guy on the website?" He's like, Are you David?" I'm like, "Yes, this is David." He goes, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, "Yeah, who else do you think you're speaking with?"
It is funny, isn't it? It's just it's funny. Yeah. But I still like to see every house I sell, actually, too, just because I think that it's important that I see every house. So, and that's actually funny too, because even if another agent at my office has it, I'm like, just, stop by and say hi to the owners, and it's fun.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
Human experience.
That's what I was wondering also. With the size of the operation, do you have time to still be an agent and have those personal connections to the other clients you work with, or is like all your time just going toward running the business?
Yeah. So it used to be that way about 5 years ago, actually, where I was running the business. And I am not good at running a business. I don't like it. So I actually really enjoy the client experience and the listing and the selling experience. So that shifted, and I brought in people to manage the business. Mm-hmm. And that's been incredible, because I want to do what feels good for me and what I'm really good at. And what feels good for me and what I'm really good at is being in, listing and selling and talking to clients, and and figuring out how we're going to get through this, or this problem came up, let's figure that out. And it's not the problem in the business. It's actually, there could be an escrow, something that's going on. And I love that. And I'm really, really good at it. So I want to stay in my own lane on that.
Talking about what you're good at, when we started the conversation, you mentioned that you're really, really good at negotiation. And I want to know more about that. Like, is there, something that's kind of like your personal technique on negotiation? Is there like an angle or something that, that's kind of how you go about it? And how you became good at it? Were you naturally good at it? Or is it over the years of doing it, like you find a way to make it work maybe better than before?
Yeah. Well, on that, I'm going to go back to connecting the dots, because you need to know who your players are when you're negotiating and what's important to them. Because sometimes you can help negotiate something through, because two things are totally different that are important to the two people, right? So I think it's really listening and seeing where everybody is, and then also being calm and figuring out a compromise. But also, like, if somebody really wants like a chandelier left and they want $5,000, like, there's always a middle ground that we can come on, and figure out, as long as we kind of just make sure that like cool heads. And I always tell people, I think it's really smart. I like to think about deals myself. Like, so I'll get their side and I'll say, okay, can we like sleep on this and let's talk in the morning? Let's really like bring this in. Mm-hmm. And so, I like to give a little space between a negotiation, and not like not like days, because that kills deals, but an overnight is a good thing to be doing, and sleeping on things and waking up in the morning and like really looking at, because it's very emotionally charged, the negotiations I do. And so I think it's really good to bring people back into just their selves. And usually the morning is the best for that. I'll mirror people when I'm sitting with them. I'll, a lot of times I'll like breathe when people are like, like I'll be, okay, let's just sit for a second and just bring it in. Right. And, so it's just all different techniques, but it's really, again, it's connecting the dots of like what is important to each person. Because in negotiation, it's give and take, right? That's why it's a negotiation. So, and being out here instead of in the emotion of it. Like, I'm like, okay, let's get both of these people where they want to be. No one's going to be totally happy on either side, but they're actually, at the end of the day, they're going to be happy that it moves forward.
It makes sense to connect the dots, because I also imagine there is just so much back and forth you can do during negotiation before you actually kill the deal, because there's just too much of it.
Oh,
yeah. And I do think it's important to, like, the other agent on the other side is to, like, we'll call myself or Paige will be calling in. We'll just be like, okay, so even at the beginning is like, even if they give you a terrible offer or something that you're like, oh God, you're like, thank you for the offer. Like, thank you. Like, let's try to work together. I mean, we're trying to do this together. This person wants to buy, we want to sell, or vice versa. Like, how can we figure this out together? I think that's, and the more seasoned agents, even the ones that are less seasoned, like if they're open to that type of community, that's like that really can help when you're working through a real estate deal for both the buyer and the seller, actually.
Yeah, I've never really thought about it, but it's interesting for you guys because you, in every transaction, are working with a potentially new person, a new agent, a different agent who's. Do you ever have situations, you must, where the buyer and seller are both people within your team?
Yeah. Sometimes we'll rep both the buyer and seller.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about that is that it's really transparency, right? So the seller, I'm just going to go with the listing side, the seller and the buyer. Everybody wants to feel safe. They want to feel safe. They want to feel seen, and they want to feel like they're everything's transparent. So the more transparent we are, and that's why we communicate, and we literally will be like, okay, here's what we got. We're just letting you know, like literally copy and paste things for people, because the more that they trust and the more they feel safe, the more that they feel held, and the more that it's going to go through, and that relationship and that connection is going to evolve because the trust is greater. So that's really what we look at doing on anything. And I'm not there. I don't need to make, like one commission isn't going to make or anything. And I've always felt that way. Even in my very first year, I'm like, if it's whatever's best for the seller or my client, whoever it is what we're going to do, And I think if you take that approach, I think it's very impactful, and people, that's how you get referrals. That's how you get like, I got you, like, we'll figure this out. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. Right. I think there's a lot of agents that'll push a deal because they want to get their commission on the other end. Yeah. And we call it commission breath. We're like, oh God,
commission breath.
Like, get away.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I'm going to get this big commission. And you're like, no, you're not doing what's right for the client. Like, let's figure what that is. So, but transparent, and we communicate like pretty like daily. Like if we do a showing, it's not the day after. Like a lot of agents will forget to like let the client know what happened. It's like, oh my gosh, no way. You have to let everyone know exactly what's happening in real time.
Interesting.
Is there a specific property that you listed and sold that is kind of like holds a special part in your heart, out of all the ones that you've been working on? Is there one that, I don't know, maybe the story of the seller was something, kind of unique, or the negotiation was very tricky? Is there one that jumps to mind?
There's a lot, actually. There's so many, but I did tell one, and I don't know why. Well, there's one that was a great story. I have a bunch of them, but I'll give you one story. It was this woman, this is just kind of this is how life goes, right? So this one woman, her mom passed away, and so she came from Northern California. She was going to sell her house in Santa Monica. And so she came in and she was just overwhelmed. And she was like, I have to have an estate sale. I have to do this. So I got her an estate person. I kind of just help with everything. And so in the estate sale, I always go in like want to have a personal relationship, because she was really torn up about her mom. And I had taken my 2 daughters there with me, and I gave them $5 to spend in the estate sale. And so they of course went and bought a bunch of stuff. And I get home, and the next morning I call her. I said, how was the estate sale? And like, how is it going? And she's like, she was almost like in tears. She's like, oh my God, you won't believe it. I sold my mom's wedding ring.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh God. And I was like, wait a minute, send me a picture of your mom's wedding ring.
No
Do you have
way.
one? And she goes, I don't. And I go, well, it's weird because my daughters, let me just, and I go to my daughters, I go, did you guys buy rings? And they're like, yeah. And
great deal.
Good deal.
I take a picture of it, and it was her mom's. And it was like, I was like, well, that is just meant to be. So like those things have happened, and just helping. It's just like the little things of, I hate to say, but I do like to help people when they've gone through a really difficult time in their selling.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's a very human experience. And to me, that feeds my soul, like more than just the money. It's not about the money. It's about the, like, what you feel it inside of yourself. So.
That's a really funny. And then your kids were like, "Sorry, there's no returns
Just a
here."
return.
Yeah, no,
I bought it. It's mine.
We took it right back up. I did take them and got them, I think, something similar, but they were like, it was a great learning experience for them too.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
right, all the way around. So.
The personal kind of connections and aspect of it, though, is huge, because I think for real estate and certainly for what we do, there is that level of involvement, and the projects they take a long time, and so even if you don't like that part of the job, if you're designing houses, that's part of the job, and you're going to go through it with someone. So I've always felt like on our side of it, like you have to enjoy it. You have to be interested in people. And it's funny you mentioned...
Well, and they go through so many different types of emotion through that process too, that, you have to hold their hand along the way. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned people who are sort of in distress for one reason or another and helping them through it. Mm-hmm. It's... For whatever reason, I feel like compared to other offices, we get a good number or more calls from people who are partway through a project, who are very unsure of where they are and the professionals they've been working with. And so we end up either consulting at a minimum or taking over and helping them out. And those projects have been some of the most rewarding. Kind of unfortunately, right? Because ideally that would never happen for anybody, because for those folks, they feel stuck. They feel stuck, and they don't know what to do. They feel trapped. And then if you can provide them kind of a helping hand to say this is the path forward, you can see it almost. Their shoulders drop. They're like, oh, I feel good now. I feel even if things are still a mess, I feel like now I have a way forward that's clear.
Well, they feel safe. I think that there's so much in this world that like people don't feel safe because they're, I mean, a lot of the clients that I'll take over a listing from somebody and like the agent like left town and didn't tell them and nobody was available and it's just like, oh my God. And I mean, that's like, we make people feel safe. Mm-hmm. We do. And I'm not talking security safe. I'm talking emotionally safe. Mm-hmm. Like we have this, we're going to take you through, we're going to walk you through this. And listen, if you decide not to sell, that's okay. We'll lease it for you, or you can live in, whatever it is, like as long as you're willing to look at what's best for that person and they can feel safe, like that's actually, again, a human connection. And that's really what makes me, fills my cup is that more than selling any house actually is the human connection I can make with those people. And that's how my agents run in my company as well.
Is there a particular type of project, or I guess house or property, that is more desirable for you to take on versus not? Like, are there certain, I don't know, I guess, are there certain things in properties where you look at them, you think this is not a good fit for us, or there's a number of red flags with it? Or is it more to do with the people, the clients themselves?
It's really the people. Yeah. Honestly, it's the people. I think I can put some special sauce in almost any property, honestly. Like there's things that you can do to make something look better than it did, or like more appealing to the buyer pool. It's really about the people. Like if I go in and, I mean, as I said, some creepy people, I'm like, there's no way we're working with you.
People want to pick your brain.
Yeah. And you're not going to pick my brain either. But usually what I do is, people are either like emotionally charged, or it's almost like a mirror. If you go in and you're like, they're going to mirror what you do as well and how you see it. So if you're connecting the dots and you're listening to what they're saying and going, okay, I hear you say this. I hear that this is why you want to go. Okay, I hear this. They're going to start that from that place of feeling safe. And then it's like, it's you're selling real estate, but you're taking them through a big emotional human experience for them. So for me, I'll do that all day long. I mean, I have one for, people like, oh, do you take anything under, this much money? I have a property right now at $600,000 up to $5.5 million right now. And we have one coming on for $16 million. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. It's taking them all through. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's the people though, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have a sense, or how or why is it that you have this sincere interest in that aspect of it? Because obviously we've talked about there are plenty of professionals, real estate agents or others, who approach things more transactionally, and they don't think about the things in the way that you're describing. Maybe they go through the motions, but it's not as conscious in a sense. Does that come from, I don't know, your upbringing, your background, and something? Like, where does that stem from?
I honestly think that, like, we're really, like, everyone thinks that we're in this life for money and all this stuff, but we're really in this life for love and happiness. And that's why I have the heart-shaped sign too. And it's like, if I can go through and I can feel warmth in my heart, it's better than any paycheck I'm ever going to get. And if I can help someone out of a really difficult situation, that's better than any paycheck I'm ever going to get. And the money will come. Like, all that stuff, I don't actually, to be honest with you, it's very funny because I don't really think about that much. I think about, like, how can we both have a really good experience? And I feel good. Like, I go outside, I feel good every day. Like, I feel, and my company feels good and the people there feel good. So it's just a different approach, I guess. My dad and my mom were that way, I would say. My dad especially, he had a huge company and he drove the same car for 20 years and honestly wore like 5 shirts. I would get him shirts. I'm like, Dad, you've got to get a new shirt. Like, like crazy. But like, he went from a farmer to having over $100 million company. And you would have thought he worked at, he did not look that way at all. And actually, I didn't even know he had that much money until he passed away this year. And then I found out. He never even, he kept it from everybody. He was like, Dad, wait a minute. So it's funny because it was more about the adventure and the moments, the moments with people. And if you look at life, that's what it's about. It's not about, you can die at 85 and have all the money in the world. And if you don't have connection and wonderful warmth and human experiences and trust and safety and love, then you don't have anything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And I think it's kind of, in some ways, refreshing to hear and see because, and I know you know this, in Los Angeles, it's very easy for people to get lost. And there's a lot of wealth in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of people who are super wealthy, but my guess would be is that they are pretty hollow on the inside, emotionally, meaning they're not happy, is what I'm saying. And I think it's the type of town where it's very easy to get sucked into that space and kind of forget the things they're talking about, really.
Yeah, well, my husband is a trauma surgeon, but he's actually I don't know if you know this, but he's a doctor, but he's a psychedelic healing doctor. So he's very much in the trauma healing space. And we have a clinic actually in Culver City, and so the last 12 years of my life, I've been really into knowing that everyone I'm talking to in real estate too, like my clients, like everyone has a story, everyone has a hurt, everyone has so the more you can just feel safe for them, like you're going to have a lifelong relationship. And I don't know, it feels good. I wasn't that way probably 20 years ago. I was more of a go-getter, even though I loved to play and party, like my last name Pardee. Like, I was like fun. I'm like, oh, and I'm still fun, but now I'm probably more mellow, a little more mellow in my older age then.
So what's next for you and the company? Like you said, you have also an office in the desert. Are you going to keep populating the United States with the little heart signs? Or like what's in the next few years for you guys?
I mean, for the next few years for us is we're really we're focusing on like our areas and what we do. We're always open to expanding, but the reality is that I have the real estate business, and then I have a foundation called Life Change Warrior, and it's actually a 16-hour class, and I teach it to homeless. I teach it at a Harvest Home and at Venice Arts right now, and it's like a life class. It's 16 hours. It's past, present, and future, helping people that don't have the means to do work on themselves do the work. So I started it about 6 years ago. So I really want to focus a lot of my time on that, about 20 hours a week. Oh. And then Pardee will continue. I have all my and people that have been with me, my work family have been with me for a long time. So we'll keep, making doing what we do in the real estate world. And I'd also like to bring that into my life and into my ether more. So Life Change Warrior for me.
That's awesome.
So on the other venture, the Life Change Warrior, was that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. And you said it's a course that you teach that lasts 16 hours? I'm intrigued to hear more about it.
Yeah. So it's a course. So how we did it is about 6 or 7 years ago, I had done a lot of work on myself because I had, there's trauma as a child. And I was like, I got to figure this out. So I did all this work, but I had the money to do it. Right. And what I realized is that there's certain things that people do in that work that are common, like a lifeline, and then, present, like we go from past, present, and then create a future vision board roadmap to where we're going. And then with very small steps on how to do it. So what I did is I sat with one of my friends who's a coach, and I was like, let's create something for people that have no access to this, because that's where we can actually make a difference.
Yeah.
Because
right.
When I'm in Venice a lot, so we have a lot of homeless and all of that. I'm like, could we get these kids when they're like 16 before they go on the street, and that they realize that they can create their life and help them, feel worthy enough. Like, yes, you have a past and it was horrible. Yes. But there's 16 other people in the room that also, when they start all telling their lifelines, they're like, oh, wait, that happened to you. That happened to you. Okay. I'm not so strange, because people don't talk about the hard things. Then we take them into the present, like, okay, we're here, we're safe. Like, everyone here is safe. Like, this is where we are now, right? You're not in the situation you were in then. And then we're like, okay, what do you want to do? Like, and we do a lot of different programming around this during the 16-hour course. Like, what do you want to do? What's in your heart? Like, what? And then we have them write it out. We have all these different tools that we use, the code, and we use like letters and all of that. So then we help them create a roadmap to where they want to go based on the 5 parts of their life. And with that is like, for instance, one of them wanted to, these were pregnant women. So they were having their babies or just had their babies. And like, for instance, Sylvie, one of them was like, I want to work at a place where I have shelter when I'm working, and so that I can raise my child. So she put all these steps down, and she ended up getting a job at an affordable housing place. Now she is one of the head people over there, managing it. She has her child. She has care. She has childcare and she has care. So like, what do a lot of them would want to get their high school certificate, and we do, okay, you want to get that? So let's write the steps down. You're going to call, enter GED, you're going to do this. And it was amazing how much it changed their life. So I want to take that in a wider scale for people, because I think that the more I have a lot of kids, the more I see kids and people, they go through school, but they don't go through like, how do you live in life? How do you create your life? How do you dream? Like, you dream, but if you don't write it down and be like, oh, this is what it feels good, and really check in with yourself, then how do you create that? Yeah. And I think people get stuck. So the whole course is about that. It's Life Change Warrior because it's a life-changing experience. And once you graduate, you become a Life Change Warrior. And it's been incredibly impactful for the classes that we've taught. So I'd like to take that on a bigger level throughout Los Angeles, really teaching at the 15 to 18-year-old range. Yeah. I'd like to take it through all the schools, actually, because I think it's a course that could be incredible. So I've been working on that.
That's fantastic. So it started off as a focus toward the people who are homeless or on the cusp of that, as kids, adolescents, 15 to 18-year-olds. And now you're thinking it's going to widen to not just that specific demographic.
Yeah, because all of these kids are, I'm in people's lives all the time, right? And they're like, there's these, 15, 16 that, first of all, they don't have direction. They don't have like the self-worth, and they don't know how to like get to where they want to go. A lot of, I'd say 95% of them, because they're not taught that in school. Yeah. And honestly, at home, a lot of kids aren't taught that because that's just not something that's normal around the kitchen table. So I think that teaching them to fish, like, you can do this and this is how you do it. And then once they make that first call, they're like, I did it. I made that first call. And then they go to the second. It's funny because it works so well. So, and I've done that my whole life. I've always done that kind of planning on everything I do, and manifesting and writing it out and doing all these things. And it works. It works.
That's phenomenal. It makes total sense on all the points. But I especially agree with that. I think a lot of the younger folks, 15 to 18-year-olds now, are highly educated. Let's say middle-class family, are highly educated in certain ways, test taking, math, literature, whatever else, all the subjects. But there is, as far as I know, really like zero education on how to exist as a human being and how to have a fulfilling life and how to think about yourself and then put that in action. Like there's all of that is actually just missing. It's not there.
Or it could also be that the possibilities are so endless that they don't even know how to tackle it. To get things moving, and they're just overwhelmed.
And that's actually a really good point, because that's what we found too, is like people are like, I want to do all these things. And I used to be that same way.
Yeah.
But if you check in with your gut, if you teach them to like kind of check in with themselves, and it takes a little bit of time, but they usually, and that's why we do this letter from your 100-year-old warrior, when they write their own story in the past tense, it actually comes out what they really, what really feeds their soul.
Interesting.
So it's, you're right. And that's part of the program is like, let's get it, into form. And listen, it's not like this is your program for your entire life. It changes. Like that's why that, on the forms, they're all just stickies. You can take them on, put them off, put new ones on, it's very fluid like that. But, that's a good point, but it actually works that people kind of know in their hearts what they want to do, for the next year or two, but they just need to get it out.
Yeah.
And then be witnessed by other people saying what they want to do and saying, I see that for you. Yes, you can do that. And giving permission to, 100%. Let's how can we help?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a funny thing though. You need to put it out there. And if you don't, then it just doesn't exist. I mean, even as simple as saying out loud, if you don't say it, if you don't tell people it, then it doesn't really, no action. It tends to be that no action happens. It just, you just remain. The listening to your gut is how I interpreted some of the conversation, is an interesting thing. Not to go too far off into this rabbit hole, but I was reading some articles recently that there's a lot of validity to that. And I think maybe 10 years ago, listening to your gut was perceived more as like you're just going with your instincts, but you're not thinking things through. Whereas I feel like now there's actually some science behind it, and there's a lot of validity to like, no, there's something there. You might not fully understand why. You might not be able to break down why you feel that way, but if you feel very strongly about something, like a yes, as you put it, then you should listen to that. You should think about it. You should do something with it.
It's so true.
It reminds me, there's this kind of a parallel. There's a joke within the architecture professions and industry that architects are great at designing buildings, but they're horrible at designing their own careers and lives. And it's a funny thing because in architecture school, you're really taught how to design. That's what you're taught. You're learning how to think, how to take a bunch of information that seems convoluted and unclear and weave a story and weave a design out of it. And if you're a good architect, that's what you know how to do. But the thing that's contradictory is that despite so many architects being good at that, they don't take that same skill set and apply it to themselves.
You could use the course. We could take it to the architecture.
It would help them. I mean, it would for sure. The course you're describing would help the vast majority of adults anyway. Yeah. But I think targeting the youth is a very smart.
It's crucial.
It makes a lot of sense. One of the final questions I had, which is not well formed in my mind, but because you see so many people and how they live and the houses that they're going to sell and the houses they're going to buy, and you have this insight therefore to how people live. I don't know if I have a specific angle with that. I'm just wondering, like, what are some of the things you see as being patterns? I don't know if maybe they're mistakes that people make when they're living or things that people like. I don't know if I would call them trends, but it's just an interesting position that you're in to get witness to all of that, which again we have, but to a much lesser volume.
It's interesting. It's like COVID kind of shifted things a little bit. So there's a little bit of different ways that people do like a little bit of like space if they can, that's not in the main house or guest house or ADU. They really enjoy having that. I think that, but one of the things that we're finding is like the outdoor area and if you look at just the gardening and the landscaping and making sure that is incorporated in the house so they feel like they're a little bit more in nature. I feel like people love, I mean, it sounds funny, but they love like moments, like areas that you can actually have a moment that you can see yourself sitting And, if it's like a eat in banquet, like they like, oh, I can sit and have breakfast with my kids there. Or, we did, like a little, like I have a layer, like Love and Inspiration room at my house where it's like it's a little off room, and people like that. Like we'll do like yoga rooms, meditation rooms where they can have just a peaceful area that's a little bit off the beaten path. I think that's something that people are looking for now. But I think high ceilings are really good. Like every smaller place, we try to like vault the ceilings out if at all possible, because people want to feel the volume in the air. What else is there? I really, the landscaping is really important right now for some reason. It's like the indoor outdoor flow, especially in our area. It's like people want to feel like they're more in nature than I've seen in the past.
I wonder if it's a yearning for some kind of calmness or peaceness, which I do think nature in general brings to people, unless you're allergic to everything, like flowers. Yeah. But I do think it brings that aspect, that feeling.
And I do think actually the earth tone colors are really where it's at right now, because the gray, all the gray that was used for so many years, people are just like, like the black and the white and the gray. It's like, it just doesn't do it. So earth tones are like spot on right now.
That's interesting.
What are you seeing?
Actually, a lot of the same. Well, one of the things, I hate to use the word trends because it makes maybe what we're talking about feel flimsy, but it's not. We're really talking about living patterns. We see the same things. I think in a need for a kind of third space or an additional space that is something that's separate from the typical everyday living is important, especially that now people are spending more time at home. Maybe that space is an office, or even if hopefully it's an additional one that's something else, I think is vital. Right. And the connection to the outdoors has always been a big part of Southern California, but I think now more than before, probably because of COVID, I think that kind of is one of the driving factors. I think also people in larger houses or even smaller houses, the giant great room space is still very desirable because it makes sense for how we live. But I think we have seen and heard from clients there are limits to that. Not everyone's the same, but a lot of folks, they don't want to live in a giant volume box where it's one giant room with like 5 different sets of furniture floating about in one giant box space. Yeah. We've heard that a number of times.
People are also very concerned with the flow of spaces. Like back in the day, the houses were just collections of boxes, and each box was a room for an activity, right? And like our current clients, everybody is very mindful about how you flow from one room to the next, the possibility to closing up spaces, opening spaces, how do they connect, how close they are from each other.
Yeah, that's right in line with what I'm saying too. Yeah. Right in line.
The final question that I always like to ask, well, I guess there's maybe 2 in this case. The first that we always ask is, what is your favorite building? And the other is maybe more easier, is what is your favorite neighborhood?
Oh, boy.
Or maybe they're both difficult.
Those are difficult. Building or house?
Building. And if you have a few, it's fine if you list a few. Doesn't have to literally be one.
I mean, honestly, I love the buildings on Abbot Kinney. Like I just love that there's houses and there's big buildings next to each other. So I love our office on Abbot Kinney because it's a little house basically. And then I love, going down the architecture on Abbot Kinney. It's like old and new. It used to be the old furniture and antique stores. And it just, to me, that street is so eclectic. So I think that's not a building, but a street.
No, that counts, yeah.
Very cool.
Interesting.
And then what was the second one?
Favorite neighborhood?
That one's hard because I actually have a few that I really, really like. I love Ocean Park in Santa Monica, Ocean Park in the Abbot Kinney area because it's walkable. And to me, that's like everything. I used to live in the Windward Circle and when I was younger in Venice, and that's an incredible area. It's right off Abbot Kinney. Gosh, it's really, I live in the Golden Triangle now and I love it because I have a lot of kids though, so it's a different time in my life, but When I say, so I love it because I'm still in the mix, but it's like nobody even knows it's here. You probably don't even know where it is.
Yeah, I don't think we know.
Nobody knows where it is. So I think it's hard to have an exact one because I want a walkable place for me. So north of Montana is great because Montana has some great stuff happening over there.
Yeah.
That means a lot to me.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Tami, thank you so much for making the time. I know you're crazy busy. We appreciate it. The conversation was awesome. We went in more directions than I thought. And thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you. It was good to see both of you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode. If you like what we're doing, then please support us by leaving a review of the show in the Apple Podcast app. You can also find us on Spotify and YouTube. Our office also has an Instagram and a YouTube and a website. So find us there. Find us with the podcast. Find Tami anywhere throughout the west side of LA. Just drive and you'll find one of her signs. But we'll have a link of hers in the description as well. Beyond that, we have a lot more guests coming up. We're missing something, a hotline.
213-222-6950. You can call, leave a voicemail, or shoot a text message.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, any topics that you want us to talk about, any guests you want to see on the show, feel free to reach out to us. Always looking for, ideas.
Yeah, always looking for ideas.
Always.
Okay, I think that's it, right?
That's
We're
it.
good?
Talk soon.
Cool. Bye.
Bye-bye.